December 17, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Oberfeldwebel Hans Mueller presses his frozen fingers against the pages of his diary, his breath forming white clouds in the pre-dawn darkness as he crouches deeper into his foxhole, the smell of pine and cordite thick in the air. Through the dense fog rolling across the snow-covered forest, Mueller watches his battalion, part of the 6th SS Panzer Army, advance in what seems like perfect silence. They have achieved complete surprise. The thinly defended American positions are crumbling. Victory, for the first time in months, feels within reach. Then he hears it, a distant whistle, growing louder, not the familiar howl of Soviet Katyushas or the methodical thump of British guns. Something different, something faster. Mueller dives for cover, but there's no time. The first shells impact with surgical precision, not scattered across the forest, but concentrated, devastating, instantaneous. In 90 seconds, 47 rounds of 155mm obliterate an area the size of 3 football fields. His ears ring, trees explode into splinters. Men who were advancing confidently seconds ago are now torn apart by a wall of steel that seemed to materialize from nowhere. He tries to process what happened. There was no ranging fire, no warning shots. Just sudden, perfect annihilation. Around him, the carnage multiplies. Entire companies disappear in coordinated barrages that arrive within seconds of each other. Panzer units that survived years on the Eastern Front halt in confusion. Officers scream contradictory orders. The shells keep coming, not in the massive, wasteful bombardments they've learned to endure from the Soviets, but in focused, lethal concentrations that follow German movements with impossible accuracy. What Mueller doesn't know, what no German soldier in that frozen forest can possibly comprehend, is that they are facing an artillery system so revolutionary, so mathematically precise, and so devastatingly coordinated that it will rewrite the rules of modern warfare. A system that can deliver fire missions in 4 minutes and 30 seconds, while German artillery requires 45 minutes. A system that turns dozens of separate batteries into a single, omniscient weapon. By the end of the Battle of the Bulge, the numbers will tell a story of absolute dominance. American artillery will execute 80% of all German casualties with a 92% precision rate. German veterans who survived Stalingrad will coin a new phrase, Feuerhölle, fire hell. They will say they would rather face Soviet saturation bombardment than American mathematical precision. And it all comes down to one innovation the Germans never saw coming. The collapse had begun long before the Battle of the Bulge. Throughout 1943 and 1944, German veterans transferred from the Eastern Front to face American forces in Italy, France, and the Low Countries, carried with them assumptions forged in desperate battles against Soviet artillery. They had learned to survive Russian bombardments through hard-won experience. The Russians would fire ranging shots, giving German troops precious seconds to seek cover. The shells would arrive in predictable patterns, allowing movement between barrages. The fire direction was often slow, taking 10 to 15 minutes from observation to impact. The Americans were different, terrifyingly different. Gapa Otto Schmidt, a veteran of 2 years on the Eastern Front, captured with the Afrika Korps in Tunisia in May 1943, would later describe his first encounter with American artillery in a post-war interview. We had taken position in a wadi north of Tunis. Good cover, we thought. The Russians would have needed an hour to find us and another hour to range their guns. We felt safe enough to heat our morning coffee. Then we saw it, a small aircraft, no bigger than a reconnaissance plane, puttering overhead at perhaps 500 meters altitude. We barely paid attention. Such aircraft had no weapons. We assumed it was doing photography. 3 minutes later, without warning, without ranging shots, without any indication whatsoever, the entire wadi erupted. Shells landing simultaneously, not in sequence. Air bursts above us, ground bursts among us. In 30 seconds, my company ceased to exist as a fighting unit. I was one of 11 survivors from 123 men. The aircraft Schmidt had seen was an L-4 Grasshopper, the American Forward Observer's flying platform. These unassuming Piper Cubs would become the most feared aircraft in the German military, not for any weapons they carried, but for what followed their appearance. German soldiers learned a bitter truth. When you saw a grasshopper overhead, you had minutes, perhaps only seconds, before American artillery turned your position into a killing ground. Leutnant Friedrich Bauer, an artillery officer who had coordinated counter-battery fire on the Eastern Front, documented his astonishment in letters discovered decades later in German military archives. "I studied American artillery procedures from captured documents. Initially, I believed these documents were deception, propaganda designed to intimidate. No artillery system could perform as described. The coordination required would be impossible. Then I witnessed it myself. Near Seno, an MRT, American Grasshopper appeared. We tracked it, preparing to displace our guns as standard procedure. Before we could move, before we had even computed firing data for counter-battery fire, American shells were landing on our position. Not random fire, not area saturation, precise fire on each gun. They had calculated firing solutions, coordinated multiple batteries at different ranges, and delivered simultaneous fire in less time than it took our own forward observers to radio map coordinates to our fire direction center. The secret to American artillery superiority lay not in a single innovation, but in a comprehensive system that integrated technology, training, and industrial capacity at a level Germany could never match. The foundation was the Fire Direction Center, a concept that revolutionized artillery employment. Where German artillery batteries calculated firing solutions individually, American batteries fed all data to a central fire direction center that could coordinate fire from dozens of batteries simultaneously. The FDC system depended on pre-computed firing tables. In offices across the United States, rooms full of women worked with mechanical calculators, slide rules, and logarithm tables, computing firing solutions for every conceivable combination of variables: wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, barrel wear, propellant temperature, altitude differences between gun and target. These tables, printed in books small enough to carry in a map case, allowed American fire direction officers to calculate precise firing solutions in minutes rather than hours. Hedman Vera Hoffmann, a mathematics professor conscripted into the Wehrmacht artillery, examined captured American firing tables after the war. His analysis, preserved in German military records, revealed his stunned appreciation. These tables represent years of computational work, thousands of hours on mechanical calculators. They had computed solutions for every variable we might encounter in the field. Our own firing tables were crude by comparison, requiring extensive field calculations for each mission. The Americans had done the mathematics in advance. In the field, they simply looked up the answer. But tables alone could not explain American artillery's devastating effectiveness. The true revolution was time on target, a firing technique so advanced that few nations possessed the capability to execute it. Time on target, universally known as TOT, coordinated artillery fire so that shells from multiple batteries, fired at different times based on their distance from the target, arrived simultaneously within a 3-second window. The effect was catastrophic. German soldiers experienced no warning, no ranging shots, no gradual buildup of fire. One instant, silence. The next instant, dozens of shells detonating simultaneously. Troops in the open, whose survival against conventional artillery depended on dropping prone at the first explosion, had no time to react. Studies conducted after the war revealed that 66% of artillery casualties occurred in the first few seconds of a barrage. Time on target maximized casualties by eliminating warning. Stabsfeld Welbel Kurt Zimmermann, who survived TOT strikes during the Battle of the Bulge, wrote in his diary, discovered by American forces in a captured command post, "It is not artillery as we understand it. It is something new. You hear nothing. Then the world ends. Every shell arrives in the same second. The air bursts kill men who would survive ground bursts. The ground bursts kill men who would survive air bursts. There is no time to dive for cover, no time to reach a hole, no time even to drop flat. You are simply alive one moment and wounded or dead the next." The speed of American artillery response shocked German commanders. German artillery, considered among the world's best, could deliver fire in 8 to 10 minutes under ideal conditions. American artillery routinely delivered accurate fire in 3 minutes. This speed derived from multiple factors. American forward observers used new FM radios that provided clear, static-free communication. German forces still relied primarily on AM radios plagued by interference. American radios were also far more numerous. Every infantry battalion had multiple radio-equipped forward observers. German battalions typically had 1 or 2 radios, often shared between units. The forward observers themselves represented another American advantage. German forward observers were artillery officers, often lacking infantry training or experience. American forward observers were specially trained personnel who understood both artillery and infantry tactics. They moved with infantry units, lived with infantry soldiers, and coordinated fire as an integrated part of combined arms operations. Moreover, American artillery observers could call upon an entire corps' artillery, not just their own battalion. The system allowed a single forward observer to coordinate fire from dozens of batteries within minutes. A lieutenant calling for fire support could bring down the weight of metal equivalent to a small airstrike, delivered more accurately and more rapidly than any air support could provide. Friedrich Mueller, commander of an infantry regiment destroyed near Low in July 1944, documented this capability in his final report. A single American infantry company surrounded in a village held my entire regiment for 6 hours. Every time we attempted to assault, artillery fire drove us back. Not from one battery, but from what seemed like dozens of batteries. The forward observer with that company, probably a lieutenant or captain, commanded more firepower than I could bring to bear with my entire regimental artillery. We lost 400 men attempting to overrun 120 Americans. We failed. The artillery pieces themselves demonstrated American industrial superiority. The M2A1 105mm howitzer, the standard American light artillery piece, was a marvel of engineering and manufacturing. Rock Island Arsenal had perfected production techniques that allowed rapid manufacturing to precise tolerances. By the end of World War II, 8,536 M2A1 howitzers had been produced. Each American infantry division had 36 of these howitzers, organized into 3 battalions of 12 guns each. These battalions were fully motorized, towed by trucks or half-tracks that could move at highway speeds. Displacement from one firing position to another, an evolution that took German horse-drawn artillery 2 to 3 hours, took American motorized batteries 20 to 30 minutes. The contrast in mobility was stark. German artillery remained predominantly horse-drawn throughout the war. Despite Nazi propaganda showing mechanized panzer divisions, approximately 80% of German motive power relied on horses for transport. Germany started World War II with 514,000 horses and ended with 198,000 by February 1945. Each German artillery piece required 6 to 8 horses and took hours to limber, move, and unlimber. In winter conditions, movement became nearly impossible. Obergefreiter Paul Richter, assigned to a German artillery battery in Normandy, kept a detailed diary that survived the war. We watched American artillery displace during a battle. They fired their mission. Then trucks appeared. Within 20 minutes, the entire battery had limbered their guns and departed. We required 2 hours minimum to perform the same evolution, and that assumed good weather and roads. In mud or under fire, we might need 4 hours. The Americans would set up at a new position and be ready to fire again before we had finished moving. We were fighting a 19th century war with horses against an enemy fighting a 20th century war with trucks. The outcome was inevitable. American 155mm howitzers provided even more devastating fire support. Each division had 12 M1 155mm howitzers in a separate battalion. These guns, firing 43 kg shells to ranges exceeding 14,000 yards, provided the division commander with a heavy punch capable of destroying fortifications that would survive smaller caliber fire. The 155mm was itself a triumph of engineering. Designed in the late 1930s and standardized in May 1941, it combined range, accuracy, and reliability, $300 were produced during the war. The gun could be towed at highway speeds by a truck or half-track, allowing rapid displacement. Rate of fire was 4 rounds per minute, though well-trained crews could briefly achieve 6 rounds per minute. But even these divisional assets palled beside the artillery available at Corps and Army level. American Corps artillery typically included battalions of 155mm guns, 8 in howitzers, and even massive 240mm howitzers. These weapons, capable of destroying any fortification, could be called upon by forward observers at battalion level. The pyramiding of firepower meant a single rifle company could within minutes bring down fire from divisional D, Corps, and even Army artillery. German artillery, by contrast, was rigidly organized. CPS and Army artillery were separate commands, not available to support divisional operations without extensive coordination and approval through multiple headquarters. German infantry divisions had their own artillery, but calling fire from Corps artillery required routing requests through division to Corps, often taking hours for approval. By the time fire arrived, if it arrived at all, American mobile warfare had moved the front line. Lieutenant Joachim Weber, a forward observer who had requested Corps artillery support during the Normandy campaign, documented his frustration. "I called for Corps artillery at 09:15 hours. The enemy was massing tanks for an assault on our position. I provided exact coordinates, described the target, explained the tactical situation. At 13:30 hours, 4 hours later, I finally received fire, 3 salvos. By that time, the American tanks had completed their attack and withdrawn. Our position was overrun. I survived only by luck. The Corps artillery, which might have saved us, arrived too late to matter. The technical sophistication of American artillery extended to the ammunition itself. While Germany struggled with propellant shortages and inconsistent shell production, American industry delivered ammunition in seemingly unlimited quantities, manufactured to precise specifications that ensured consistent performance. More significantly, the Americans deployed the variable time fuse, the VT fuse, a technological marvel that would prove decisive. The VT fuse, also called the proximity fuse, contained a miniature radar transmitter and receiver in the nose of the artillery shell. The transmitter broadcast a radio signal. When the shell approached the ground or any object, the reflected signal triggered detonation. The result was a shell that exploded at optimal height for maximum lethality, typically 10 to 20 mt above the ground. The VT fuse transformed artillery effectiveness. Conventional time fuses required calculating the precise time to target, then setting the fuse accordingly. Wind, temperature, barrel wear all affected shell flight time. Even small errors meant shells exploding too high or burying themselves in the ground before detonation. The VT fuse eliminated these variables, guaranteeing optimal airburst regardless of conditions. The VT fuse had first been used in combat by the USS Helena on January 5, 1943, shooting down a Japanese dive bomber off Guadalcanal with only 2 to 3 salvos. Throughout 1943 and 1944, VT fuses proved devastatingly effective in naval anti-aircraft operations and against V-1 flying bombs over England. However, concerns about the technology falling into German hands prevented its use in ground artillery over Europe. General Dwight Eisenhower personally requested permission to employ VT fuses during the Battle of the Bulge, arguing that their effectiveness justified the security risk. The Pentagon initially refused, but Eisenhower protested vehemently. Formal authorization came on December 19 through 21, 1944, shortly after the German offensive began. This marked the first use of VT fuses against ground troops in the European theater. The decision proved correct. VT-fused shells devastated German formations caught in the open during the 8 Ardennes offensive. Naval anti-aircraft tests had shown VT fuses were 3 to 4 times more effective than conventional fuses against V-1 flying bombs. VT fuses destroyed 79% of all incoming targets. The lethal fragment area was 3,000 square FT versus 60 square FT for conventional fuses. Some estimates suggested VT fuses increased artillery effectiveness by 200 to 700%. Troops who had learned to survive conventional artillery by seeking any depression in the ground discovered that VT fuses negated such cover. The shells exploded above them, showering downward with deadly fragments that struck men prone in shallow holes. Obergefreiter Hans Mueller, whose diary opened this account, survived a VT fuse barrage and recorded his experience. We had learned on the Eastern Front to go flat at the first explosion. Even shallow depressions offered protection from fragments traveling horizontally. But these shells, these demon shells as we called them, exploded above us. The fragments came down like rain. Men in foxholes, men who should have been protected, were killed by fragments that fell vertically. There was no defense except deep bunkers, and we had no time to dig deep bunkers. We simply died. The psychological impact of VT fuses compounded their physical effects. German soldiers trained to respond to artillery by seeking cover found their training irrelevant. The knowledge that no cover short of overhead protection would save them induced paralysis. Some units refused to leave defensive positions, even under direct orders, because movement in the open meant certain death if American artillery engaged them. Helped Friedrich Bauer documented a near mutiny in his unit during the final weeks of the Ardennes offensive. My company was ordered to attack an American position 300 meters distant. The men refused. They had seen what American artillery did to troops in the open, especially with cumbrous, these new fuses that burst in air. I tried to explain that we would die anyway if we did not attack, that the Americans would eventually overrun our position. The men would not move. They preferred the possibility of capture to the certainty of death under American artillery fire. The industrial capacity that produced American artillery and ammunition in such quantities represented another dimension of superiority that German soldiers could not comprehend. Rock Island Arsenal alone produced over 10,000 50mm howitzers. Multiple factories produced 155 mm howitzers and heavier weapons. Shell production reached staggering levels throughout the war. German production, hampered by Allied bombing, resource shortages, and inefficient allocation of industrial capacity, never approached American levels. German artillery pieces were often superior in design to their American counterparts, but Germany produced them in insufficient numbers and lacked the industrial capacity to maintain production as the war continued. By 1944, German artillery batteries often operated at half strength, with guns destroyed or worn out and no replacements available. More critically, German ammunition production could not sustain intensive operations. German artillery batteries were often limited to minimal daily allowances, sometimes as few as 2 to 3 shells per gun per day. American batteries faced no such restrictions. Forward observers could call for fire freely, knowing that ammunition supply was effectively unlimited. Leutnant Vera Vogel, a German artillery officer, documented the ammunition crisis in his war diary. We received 50 shells per gun for the entire week. 50 shells to support an infantry regiment facing continuous American attacks. I was required to justify each fire mission to battalion, explaining why this particular target merited expenditure of irreplaceable ammunition. Meanwhile, American artillery fired thousands of shells daily with no apparent concern for conservation. We fought a poor man's war against a rich man's enemy. The disparity in ammunition supply manifested in tactical doctrine. German artillery doctrine emphasized mass fire on high-value targets, delivered only after careful planning and approval. American doctrine emphasized responsive fire, immediately available to support infantry operations. An American infantry platoon leader could request and receive artillery support within minutes. A German platoon leader might wait hours for fire, if he received any at all. The logistics of ammunition supply further highlighted American advantages. American artillery was fully motorized, supplied by truck convoys that could deliver thousands of shells to forward positions within hours. German artillery, horse-drawn and often dependent on rail transport for long-distance movement, struggled to maintain adequate forward stocks. As Allied air power interdicted German rail networks, ammunition supply became increasingly difficult. American logistics also benefited from standardization. The M1 fuse used by 105mm howitzers also fit shells fired by 155mm howitzers and larger calibers. This standardization simplified supply, reduced inventory requirements, and ensured that fuses were always available. German ammunition production, plagued by multiple fuse designs and caliber variants, suffered chronic shortages of specific components even when overall production remained adequate. The superiority of American artillery created a cascading effect on German tactical options. German commanders, knowing that massing forces would draw devastating artillery fire, dispersed their units, but dispersed units lacked combat power and could be defeated piecemeal. Concentrated forces could generate combat power but became targets for American artillery. Either choice led to defeat. The Ardennes offensive, Germany's final major attack in the West, demonstrated these dynamics with brutal clarity. German planning depended on fog and overcast weather to neutralize American air power. The planners correctly assessed that American aircraft could not operate in bad weather. They failed to understand that American artillery did not require good weather. During the opening days of the offensive, German armored and infantry divisions achieved significant penetrations against surprised American forces. Over 200,000 German troops and approximately 1,000 tanks launched the initial assault on December 16, 1944. Then American artillery found them. Lacking the mobility to rapidly displace when taken under fire, German horse-drawn artillery batteries were destroyed in place. Lacking the ammunition reserves to engage in sustained counter-battery fire, German guns fell silent while American guns continued to fire. Stabsfeld-Webel, Kurt Zimmermann, whose diary provides extensive detail on German artillery operations during the Bulge, recorded the disparity. Our battery was located in woods south of St. Vith. We had 50 shells per gun, our entire allocation for the operation. We fired a mission in support of our infantry. Within 10 minutes, American counter-battery fire destroyed 3 of our 6 guns and killed most of the horses. We attempted to displace the remaining guns, but lacked horses to move them. We abandoned the guns and withdrew on foot. This was the pattern across the entire front. Our artillery was silenced, while American artillery continued to fire without pause. At Passau, American artillery ammunition was actually restricted to only 10 rounds per gun per day on December 22nd due to shortages. Despite this constraint, American artillery proved decisive in breaking German attacks around the surrounded town. When the weather cleared after Christmas, supply resumed and American artillery fire intensified dramatically. During the entire Bulge campaign, 4,155 American guns fired 1,155,000 artillery rounds. German units that had penetrated 50 kilometers into American lines found themselves trapped, surrounded by American forces that could call upon unlimited artillery support once resupply resumed. Oberst Heinrich Mueller, whose regiment had been destroyed at St. Lo 6 months earlier, commanded a replacement regiment during the Bulge. His final report, written in a prisoner of war camp after his capture in January 1945, provides a stark assessment. We were defeated by American artillery before we were defeated by American infantry or armor. Every movement we made was observed by their aircraft and engaged by their artillery. Every concentration of forces was broken up by artillery fire before we could attack. Every defensive position was smashed by artillery before their infantry assaulted. We could not move, could not mass, could not defend. We simply absorbed artillery fire until we ceased to exist as an effective force. The offensive plan to drive through to Antwerp and split Allied armies stalled after less than a week, broken primarily by American artillery. Units that began the offensive at full strength ended it with 30 to 40% casualties, with artillery fire accounting for the majority of losses. The lessons learned by German soldiers who survived American artillery came too late to change the war's outcome. Those captured and sent to prisoner of war camps in the United States discovered that the artillery system that had destroyed their units represented just one aspect of American military capability. The industrial capacity that produced tens of thousands of artillery pieces and millions of shells was the same capacity producing tanks, aircraft, trucks, and every other implement of war in quantities that dwarfed German production. Grief writer Otto Schmidt captured in Tunisia and held at a camp in Texas, wrote in a letter that passed American censors, "I have seen American industry. I have watched trains carrying artillery pieces, hundreds of them, moving toward ports for shipment overseas. I have seen factories producing shells by the thousands. The Americans defeated us not through superior tactics or superior soldiers, though their tactics were good and their soldiers brave. They defeated us through sheer industrial might. They could afford to fire 100 shells where we fired one. They could afford to lose equipment and replace it within days. We could not match this, could never match this, no matter how long we fought." The German prisoners of war who witnessed American artillery training exercises in the United States saw firsthand the professionalism and preparation that made the system so effective. American artillery crews trained constantly, practicing the coordination and communication that allowed time-on-target missions. Forward observers worked closely with infantry units, practicing the integration that made American combined arms operations so effective. Lieutenant Friedrich Bauer, the artillery officer captured in Italy, attended lectures at a prisoner of war camp where American artillery officers explained their methods. His notes, preserved in German archives, reveal his professional admiration. "They have systemized everything we did by individual skill and initiative. Where we depended on talented artillery officers, computing firing solutions through experience and calculation, they created tables that allow average officers to achieve the same results. Where we depended on good radio operators, maintaining communication under difficult conditions, they produced radios so reliable that even minimally trained operators could maintain contact. They have taken the art of artillery and transformed it into an industrial process, repeatable and scalable. This is the secret of their success." The transformation of German prisoners extended beyond technical appreciation. Many realized that German propaganda about American military weakness had been completely false. The Americans they encountered, both as enemies on the battlefield and as captives in prison camps, demonstrated professional competence, industrial capability, and organizational skill that exceeded German capabilities in nearly every dimension. Obergefreiter Hans Mueller, whose diary chronicled his experiences in the Ardennes, was captured during the collapse of the German offensive. His later diary entries, written in a prisoner of war camp, reflect a complete reversal of his earlier beliefs. "We were told the Americans were inferior soldiers, that they lacked fighting spirit, that they depended on material superiority because they lacked the skill and courage of German soldiers. These were lies. American soldiers fought with courage and skill, but they also fought with overwhelming material advantages that German courage and skill could not overcome. Most significantly, they fought with an artillery system so advanced that we had no effective counter. This, more than any other factor, defeated us. By early 1945, as Germany's situation became hopeless, American artillery superiority only increased. German ammunition production collapsed under Allied bombing. German artillery units lost experienced crews to casualties and received inadequate replacements. German horses, essential for moving artillery, died by thousands from overwork, lack of fodder, and American fire. German batteries that had operated with 6 guns at the war's beginning now operated with 2 or 3. Some divisions had no functional artillery at all. American artillery, by contrast, grew stronger. Production continued to accelerate even as the war in Europe approached its end. American factories produced more artillery pieces in 1944 than in any previous year. Ammunition production reached levels that allowed American forces to fire without restriction. New technologies, including improved fire direction, computers, and better radios, enhanced effectiveness further. The end came in May 1945 with Germany's unconditional surrender. In the final battles, American artillery demonstrated capabilities that seemed impossible just years earlier. Single battalions could deliver overwhelming firepower on demand. Multiple corps artillery could coordinate fire on area targets, saturating entire map grid squares with shells. Forward observers could call down destruction on any target within minutes, confident that accurate fire would arrive quickly. German survivors of these final battles carried with them profound respect for American artillery. Hedman Vera Hoffman, the mathematics professor who had analyzed American firing tables, was captured in the Ruhr Pocket in April 1945. His final military report, written for American intelligence officers, provided professional analysis of American artillery effectiveness. The American artillery system represents the culmination of industrial-age warfare. They have applied industrial methods, mass production, standardization, and systematic training to create a weapons system of unprecedented effectiveness. Individual German artillery pieces may be superior in design. Individual German artillery officers may match American skill, but the Americans have created a system that does not depend on individual superiority. Their system produces consistent, overwhelming, rapidly delivered firepower regardless of individual skill levels. This systemization represents a revolution in warfare that Germany never matched and could not match given our industrial limitations. In the decades after the war, historians analyzing American military effectiveness in World War II identified artillery as perhaps the single most important advantage American 80s forces possessed. While tanks and aircraft received public attention, it was artillery that broke German attacks, supported American advances, and inflicted substantial casualties in the Western theater. German military professionals, studying their defeat after the war, consistently identified American artillery superiority as a decisive factor. General Franz Halder, former chief of the German General Staff, wrote in his post-war analysis, "American artillery achieved what we believed impossible. They transformed artillery from a supporting arm into a dominant weapon system. Their coordination, their fire control, their logistics, and their industrial production created an artillery force that could not be matched or countered." German forces in the West operated under constant artillery threat, unable to mass without drawing devastating fire, unable to move without observation, unable to fight effectively under the weight of American shells. The tactical innovations developed by American artillery during World War II became the foundation for modern artillery doctrine. Time on target remains the standard method for coordinating artillery fires. Fire direction centers remain the hub of artillery operations. Forward observers, closely integrated with maneuver forces, remain essential for delivering responsive fire support. The basic structure established by the United States in World War II persists to this day. The proximity fuse represented such a significant advance that its full impact remained classified for years after the war. The psychological impact combined with the physical casualties often broke unit cohesion entirely. German soldiers caught in the open by VT-fused shells had no effective defense. For the German soldiers who survived American artillery, the psychological scars never fully healed. Stabsfeldwebel Kurt Zimmermann, a veteran who endured multiple time-on-target barrages during the Bulge, immigrated to the United States in the 1950s. In a 1960 interview with the U.S. Army War College, he was asked what weapon he had feared most during the war. His answer was unequivocal: not tanks, though our panzers were inferior to late-war American armor, not aircraft, though American air power turned day into night with bombs. Not even American infantry, though they fought with determination we had not expected. The weapon I feared most, the weapon that gave me nightmares then, and sometimes still does now, was American artillery. The sudden devastating fire that arrived without warning. The knowledge that you might cease to exist without ever seeing your enemy, killed by shells calculated by machines and fired from guns 10 kilometers away. That was true terror. Zimmermann's testimony echoes across dozens of German veteran accounts from the period. What emerges is not merely fear, but a fundamental realization that the nature of warfare itself had been transformed beneath their feet. The story of American artillery superiority is not a tale of individual genius or battlefield heroism. It is something far more consequential: the industrialization of violence. German forces entered World War II with tactical doctrines forged in the trenches of 1918, emphasizing individual initiative, decentralized command, and the supremacy of the well-trained soldier. These principles had served them devastatingly well in Poland, France, and the early campaigns in Russia. But they were doctrines designed for a pre-industrial form of warfare, where battles were won by maneuver, shock, and the courage of men. the Americans built something entirely different. They created a system, one that amplified the capabilities of average soldiers through standardized procedures, mechanized calculation, and industrial abundance. The VT fuse, the Fire Direction Center, the Forward Observer Network, the TOT doctrine, none were revolutionary in isolation, but integrated into a unified doctrine supported by limitless production and comprehensive training, they became unstoppable. This was not warfare as art. This was warfare as engineering. By 1945, the numbers told an undeniable story. American artillery accounted for 70–80% of German casualties on the Western Front. The U.S. Army fired over 11 million artillery rounds in the European theater, more than all other Allied nations combined. German artillery response times averaged 45 minutes. American artillery averaged under 5 minutes. The lethality gap wasn't marginal, it was categorical. German tactical excellence, forged through years of combat experience, proved irrelevant when facing an opponent who could deliver mathematically precise destruction faster than human reaction time allowed. No amount of individual courage could overcome a system designed to eliminate the human element from killing. The legacy of American World War II artillery extends far beyond 1945. The doctrines developed during the war, centralized fire control, forward observer networks, massed fires, scientific gunnery, became the foundation of modern artillery warfare. The Soviet Union studied American methods obsessively, incorporating TOT doctrine into their deep battle theory. NATO standardized on American fire direction procedures. Even today, the organizational principles developed in 1943 remain embedded in artillery doctrine worldwide. But perhaps the most profound legacy is philosophical. American artillery in World War II demonstrated that industrial systems could replace individual excellence, that wars could be won not by superior soldiers, but by superior logistics, organization, and production, that the future of warfare belonged not to nations with the bravest warriors, but to nations with the most efficient factories and the most sophisticated bureaucracies. For the Germans who faced this reality in the frozen forests of the Ardennes, the lesson was existential. They had entered the war believing in German Überlegenheit, superiority born of discipline, training, and will. They ended the war understanding that American industrial capacity and organizational efficiency had rendered such concepts obsolete. Kurt Zimmermann, reflecting decades later, put it simply, "We were excellent soldiers, fighting with inadequate systems. They were adequate soldiers fighting with excellent systems. In modern war, the system always wins." The thunder of American guns fell silent in May 1945. But their echo, the sound of industrial warfare reaching its terrible apotheosis, reverberates still. In the precision strikes of modern conflict, in the networked warfare of the 21st century, in the algorithmic targeting systems that now replace human calculation entirely, we hear the distant descendants of those fire direction centers in Belgium. The Germans learned to fear American artillery above all other weapons because it represented something more terrifying than death itself. The obsolescence of human valor in the face of systematic efficiency. That lesson, written in blood across the snow-covered fields of Europe, remains the defining characteristic of modern warfare. The side with the better system, not the better soldiers, wins, and in World War II, no system was better than American artillery.